From ABC, this is World News Tonight with Max Robinson at the National Desk in Chicago, Peter Jennings at the Foreign Desk in London, a special assignment report, The Hostages, Surviving Freedom, and at our desk in the new ABC News Washington headquarters building, Frank Reynolds.
Good evening. Again today, the United States tried to walk the thin line between friends of this country in the Middle East who are also enemies of each other. A central figure in the long conflict between Israel and its neighbors, Jordan's King Hussein, arrived at the White House, still opposed to Camp David, but now also letting it be known he may want to shop for Soviet weapons. All this at a time of increased tension between Israel and the United States over another American effort to involve Arabs in the peace process. Tonight, a full report. First, White House correspondent Sam Donaldson.
Once upon a time when King Hussein met new American presidents at the White House, as he met Ronald Reagan, his sixth, here this morning, he was doing so as Washington's principal friend in the Arab world, but no longer. That place belongs to Egypt now. But if Hussein does play a lesser role, Mr. Reagan quickly moved to reassure him that he knows it is still a most important one.
Let it be understood that America seeks peace with honor and security for all the states and people of the region. For our part, no one should doubt that the preservation of Jordan's security, integrity, and its unique and enduring character remains a matter of highest importance.
While Mr. Reagan seemed to be talking about protecting Jordan from other Arabs, the King replied in terms of protecting all the Arabs from some unnamed common threat.
I see in jeopardy not only Arab rights and legitimate interests, but a threat to the very Arab identity and the rights of future Arab generations.
Hussein's veiled reference undoubtedly was to Israel and the U.S.-sponsored Camp David Comprehensive Peace Plan, which he opposes. This balancing act between the two moved on to the Oval Office. For his part, Mr. Reagan wants to dissuade the king from purchasing arms from the Soviet Union. And for his part, Hussein wants to move the United States toward a Mideast peace plan more like the one proposed by Saudi Arabia. Later, after conferring with Secretary Haig at the State Department, Hussein maintained that except for Egypt, the Saudi plan is the Arab plan.
It does not differ basically from any of the positions that we have adopted.
The king may get more American arms in place of Soviet, but is unlikely to get his way on peace plans. A senior White House official said today that President Reagan, in referring to the 8-point Saudi plan, which includes the creation of a Palestinian state, in no way meant to embrace it. Camp David is the plan for peace, said the official. Sam Donaldson, ABC News, the White House.
This is John McWethy. At the Pentagon, the Reagan administration was trying to step away from yet another rumored U.S.-Saudi alliance. Pentagon spokesman Benjamin Wells labeled as totally unfounded and ludicrous reports that emerged over the weekend in the Washington Post of a secret deal with the Saudis, a deal involving the sale of AWACS planes to the Saudis in exchange for American bases there. Yet when Wells presented two young colonels to back up his assertion, it became clear that while there may be no secret deal, the Reagan administration does expect to use Saudi bases if the Soviets ever threaten the region.
We are convinced that the Saudis, for their own national security interests, will be anxious to have us assist them in providing that deterrence or defense.
The U.S. has sold the Saudis more than 150 advanced fighters and is also helping to expand its naval and air facilities to the point that even Pentagon officials admit the Saudis can't hope to fully utilize the structures they're building.
So even though there is no formal secret agreement, there definitely has been some planning by both sides. Planning that will make it a great deal easier for American forces to use Saudi Arabia as a forward base should the situation ever call for it. John McWethy, ABC News, the Pentagon.
In the Middle East itself today, Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Fahd urged the United States to recognize the Palestine Liberation Organization. He told the Saudi news agency there is no peace without the Palestinian people and no Palestinian state without the PLO. Prince Fahd called his 8-point plan for a Middle East settlement an acceptable and balanced substitute for the Camp David Accords. Israel's Prime Minister Begin couldn't disagree more. He told Parliament, "We reject the Saudi plan from point 1 to point 8. The Saudi proposal," said Mr. Begin, "tries to dictate what Israel's borders should be, and it seeks," he said, "to steal away the Israeli capital, Jerusalem." Max?
Well, still ahead, Sweden rescues that grounded Russian submarine, but still won't let it go. Astronauts Engel and Truly arrive at Cape Canaveral as the shuttle countdown continues, and Hughes Rudd has the bare facts about a wrestler named Victor.
ABC's World News Tonight, brought to you by Formby's Furniture Refinishing Products.
Now for the latest on the no longer stuck but still not free Soviet submarine. We go to our foreign desk in London again and Peter Jennings. Peter?
Frank, in Sweden, it looks very much as if the governments of Sweden and the Soviet Union have reached an agreement. If not on the immediate fate of the Soviet submarine, at least on those issues which Sweden had wanted resolved before it would even consider releasing the sub. The agreement has come on a day when the submarine itself was more buffeted by the weather than it was by the political ramifications of where it was. From Sweden, ABC's Jacques Grenier.
In high winds and heavy seas this afternoon, the Soviet submarine was shifting on the rocky bottom where it went aground last week. Worried about damage to the sub, the crew broadcast a distress signal. The Swedish Navy, using tugboats, pulled the sub from the spot where it was stranded. There are Swedish gunboats around the submarine's new location. Having finally received permission from the Soviet Union to answer Swedish questions, the Soviet captain and his navigator had earlier gone to an anchored patrol boat to do just that. As armed guards in small boats chased other vessels away, the captain tried to explain how he happened to be in restricted Swedish waters when he ran aground. This fulfilled the last of 4 Swedish demands from the Soviet Union. Earlier demands for a Soviet apology, for a Swedish-only salvage operation, and for compensation for the salvage costs had all been met. But the Swedes were still skeptical about Soviet explanations. The Swedish officer overseeing the submarine incident said the investigators would also visit the submarine to verify the navigation equipment. The Soviets have claimed they penetrated to just a few miles from a Swedish naval base because of faulty equipment. Jacques Grenier, ABC News, Karlskrona, Sweden.
In Poland today, no guarantees of a breakthrough, but after more than 3 weeks of unusually intense and costly industrial unrest, the independent union and the government have stepped up their appeals for an end to wildcat strikes. As Jerry King reports from Warsaw, the efforts to get the full workforce back on the job have met with a mixed reaction.
What's seen here is a crucial week opened with Lech Wałęsa persuading representatives of 120,000 workers to suspend their wildcat strike in Tarnobrzeg. He did so by bringing a government promise of renewed talks about ways to improve food supplies in the region. Still, local leaders vowed to walk out again if those talks do not bring immediate and positive results. The strike suspension was confirmed at a mass rally. Tarnobrzeg is particularly sensitive to the government because its sulfur mines export mainly to the Soviet Union. Solidarity officials in several other centers, including the vital coal mine region of southern Poland, also called off strikes or strike threats. But in Żyrodów, local union officials listened to a new appeal from the government, decided it was not enough, and their protest moved into its 4th week. They'll send a team to Gdansk tomorrow, demanding a general strike. But the mood at Solidarity's national executive meeting in Gdansk will be anything but pro-strike. The union leadership is expected to discuss its own ban on wildcat strikes. And if the membership refuses to go along with it, Solidarity's leadership loses its credibility. And that, as Lech Wałęsa has already warned, could well mean the end of Solidarity and of many of its achievements over the past 14 months. Jerry King, ABC News, Warsaw.
Continued and critical labor unrest here in Britain. The future of this country's biggest car maker is in doubt. 58,000 workers at British Leyland, which includes Jaguar and Land Rover among its models, are striking for more pay. The company chairman says if the labor force doesn't vote to return to work tomorrow, he'll close the plants. The result would be a serious blow to a troubled British economy. A snowball effect could add hundreds of thousands to unemployment rolls already at record highs. Max?
Here at home, Peter, most major banks today cut their prime rate by half a point to 17.5%. That follows a Federal Reserve Board decision on Friday to cut by a full percentage point the rate it charges member banks for loans. Those declining interest rates again sent the stock market sharply higher. The countdown at the Cape continues for the Wednesday morning launch of the Space Shuttle Columbia. Astronauts Joe Engle and Richard Truly today flew to Cape Canaveral to prepare for Columbia's 2nd mission in space. Science editor Jules Bergman reports.
The flight from Houston was uneventful. Spacecraft commander Joe Engle in one T-38 jet trainer and co-pilot Dick Truly in a second. And if the 1-month delay in the launch of the shuttle had irritated Engel and Truly, it didn't show today.
The Columbia's ready, and Joe and I are more than ready, and we really appreciate all y'all coming out this afternoon to greet us. We're all set to go, and I couldn't thank you anymore. We're glad to see you. Thanks a lot.
They then got back in their T-38s and flew approaches to the shuttle runway at the Cape. Meanwhile, at Pad 39, the countdown is still moving smoothly toward Wednesday's launch. The problem, if there is one, could be high winds which have plagued the Cape since Thursday. But Shuttle Test Director Deke Slayton is optimistic.
Our forecast for Wednesday looks pretty reasonable right now. The winds are blowing a little strong, but they're supposed to rotate around to the south and lessen up, so we're very optimistic right this minute. Weather looks good here, and it looks good out at our landing site.
Tonight it's early to bed for Engel and Truly. Tomorrow they'll get up at the same hour as they will on launch day, visit the pad before dawn, then go fly the shuttle training aircraft for a final session of practice emergency landings before Wednesday's scheduled 7:30 a.m. liftoff. Jules Bergman, ABC News at the Kennedy Space Center.
ABC News will provide live coverage of Columbia's second mission in space beginning at 6 a.m. Eastern Time Wednesday morning. On the West Coast, scientists from around the world are looking even deeper into space, and what they're learning may teach us a lot about this planet. Stephen Gear reports.
Satellite data from the planet Venus is leading scientists into predictions of serious dangers for planet Earth. This is a composite of photographs of the heavy cloud cover of Venus made up largely of carbon dioxide. Were it not for this blanket, Venus, which is similar in size to the Earth and only 30% closer to the Sun, would have temperatures similar to ours. But Venus boils with a surface temperature of 900 degrees. The carbon dioxide produces a greenhouse effect, keeping the Sun's heat locked in.
We're very concerned in the case of the Earth that by burning fossil fuels, we're gradually increasing the carbon dioxide content of our atmosphere, and we're going to cause the climate to get significantly hotter.
Carbon dioxide in the Earth's atmosphere has increased 15% in the past 50 years. Also fascinating the scientists here is the limited movement of the geologic crust of Venus, the kind of movement that causes earthquakes. One factor is that Venus has no moon, lending credence to theories that our moon may contribute to earthquake activity. These are the only photos of Venus's surface taken by a Soviet probe, but another Russian satellite launched last Friday is due to land on Venus in March. Stephen Gear, ABC News, Palo Alto, California.
In other national news, armed inmates at Graterford State Prison near Philadelphia this evening released a group of hostages held since last Wednesday and surrendered. The inmates had barricaded themselves in a prison kitchen after an escape attempt failed. And actor Rock Hudson, who is 55, is reported in serious but stable condition tonight after bypass heart surgery. Surgeons in Los Angeles performed 5 bypasses during a 5.5-hour operation.
The State Department today confirmed what has been common knowledge for years, that American citizens have been flying and servicing planes in Libya, and a spokesman called their actions reprehensible. The New York Times reported today that a pilot who is a British citizen, John Anthony Stubbs, is no longer in Libya. He refused an assignment to fly missions to Chad. Later tonight, Nightline will have more on the American-Libya connection, including a live interview with Stubbs. 2 years ago this week, on November 4th, 1979, this country began a prolonged period of what can only be described as national trauma. The embassy in Iran was seized and the hostage crisis began. It was not to end until 444 days had passed. And how are they doing now, the former hostages? Lynn Scher has this special assignment report.
For many former hostages, life today, 9 months after their release, may not be normal, but as Barry Rosen says, it's normalizing.
I think that the process has been long enough for me to feel pretty good about myself. And the apprehensions that I did have in the beginning, will I be all right? They're not there now.
Barry Rosen is working on his doctoral degree at Columbia. Catherine Kobe back at work with the Foreign Press Center in New York. Robert Odie back in retirement, growing roses in Arizona. Moorhead Kennedy back in the public eye as founder of the Cathedral Peace Institute in Manhattan, exploring the relationship between religion and world politics. He quit the State Department, saying he doesn't have to prove himself anymore.
When you are taken out of this particular treadmill, left to think things over for a prolonged period of time, you begin to wonder, well, was it worth it? And suppose I get to be an ambassador. So what?
Only 3 have resigned from the State Department. One who hasn't, Bruce Langan, has been asked to run for senator from Maryland. 2 Marines are back guarding embassies. One of the 5 who left military service, Billy Gallegos, can't find a job. He's gotten interested in the survivalist movement. 5 hostages have married, 4 divorcing. The first hostage book is out by Richard Queen, at least 4 others in the works. And there's a film made by Marine Sergeant Jimmy Lopez before reassignment in Finland. It features characters he invented in captivity and a wry look at his homecoming.
Mom! There he is! Dad!
Many say the sudden attention helped.
To be able to just walk in and everybody says, well, hi, Joe, how are you? How's everything going? You know, that's something everybody wants. They want to be rich and they want to be famous. Well, I'm not rich, and hopefully I won't be famous for much longer. But everybody likes that.
But the instant fame also created problems.
You might say that I've sort of become a professional hostage. I get stopped on the street and welcomed. We had to put in an answering machine because we received so many phone calls.
The families have been affected too. Jesse and Mary Lopez say they read the papers more now, take things more seriously, and they still keep yellow ribbons.
I don't want to forget the resolutions I made to myself. One of them is to be more aware and more concerned about important things, not petty things.
That is precisely the change many hostages report.
I find myself worrying less about the past, less about the future, trying to focus on that moment.
I'm perhaps a little less apt to jump to a conclusion or to take things quite so personally, a little more relaxed when something happens that I feel I have absolutely no control over.
It brought out a great degree of somewhat latent patriotism in me. If I have to lay a wreath somewhere or speak at Veterans Day parades, I find that to be an honor.
But apart from the patriotism and national unity that seemed to grow out of the experience, there was a much darker side. Because while this park in western Pennsylvania was symbolically raising 1 flag for each day of captivity, individual hostages were suffering, leaving some with lingering resentments, others with serious problems. Joe Subik's eyes, so sensitive after those days without sun, he needs tinted glasses. Barry Rosen trying biofeedback to sleep better. Malcolm Kaup bearing the pain of vicious beatings after he tried to escape.
Because of, I think, some kicks in the head, I have a constant ringing in my head that sounds like a low-pitched siren most of the time, except sometimes it does get higher pitched and sometimes it hurts when it gets higher pitched.
I've lost a period of time out of my life, and especially being away from my wife. And at our age, that isn't something we can afford. I certainly have no love or forgiveness in my heart for the Iranian terrorists who put us through that experience.
I have to admit to a certain amount of satisfaction and gladness in my heart when I see the Parliament building fall down around their necks.
Still, many say the experience made them stronger, that they gained self-confidence from knowing they could keep going then and now, 2 years later.
I can say that every morning when I shave, I look at myself and I say, you did good. You did good. You have, for that particular situation, you got through, you had your inner strength, and you made it.
Lynn Scher, ABC News.
Finally tonight, in the tradition of Killer Kowalski, Gorgeous George, and Haystacks Calhoun, now there's Victor, as Hughes Rudd reports.
Nobody has ever accused wrestling of being the sport of kings. There's no evidence whatever that it improves the breed, and its practitioners often look downright stupid. That may account for wrestling's popularity. We all like to have somebody around who seems even dumber than we are. Then there's Victor, The music underlines the fact that this is Victor's moment of truth. Not in a bull ring, of course, but in a wrestling ring set up in a shopping mall. Victor is an Alaskan brown bear, 650 pounds, 8 feet 5 inches in his bare feet. With kindness and patience, trainer George Allen has taught Victor to wrestle human beings for a living. In this case, Victor's working in West Virginia. He was working in Virginia, but the Athletic Commission over there barred him on the grounds that Victor is mentally incompetent and has too much facial hair to wrestle in Virginia.
If they say the bear has too much facial hair, I would suggest that the Athletic Commission check their wrestlers, because they have a Russian team down there now with full beards on their face and bald heads.
Oh, really?
Victor's mental competency is the same as a German Shepherd or a Doberman.
Okay, give me the next victim. Volunteer. George is saying that Victor has as much learning ability as a smart dog, and it appears he has more than that. Victor knows 18 classic wrestling holds, which is more than most athletic commissioners probably know, and certainly more than any German Shepherd we've ever run across. The young fellows who wrestle Victor don't get a test for mental competency, and maybe that's just as well. How was it? That's great. You didn't really get him down, though, did you? Too big. Too big. Unlike most wrestling matches, Victor's aren't fixed. He just wins. Okay, Victor, come on. Let him go. Between bouts, he keeps his strength up with big slugs of Kool-Aid, but he's a vegetarian, unlike one wrestler we used to know who bit the heads off live chickens just to try and frighten the customers. After all, wrestling is a hairy business. Have another Kool-Aid, Victor. Hughes Red, ABC News, Fairmont, West Virginia.
Thank you, Hughes. Now, I hope you'll pardon our pride, but we are indeed proud to be making this first World News Tonight broadcast from our brand new broadcast center here in Washington. A 10-story building jammed with the latest in technology to help us do better, and a lot of people who are determined to do just that. That's our report for now on World News Tonight. This is Frank Reynolds for ABC News. Good night from Washington.